In 246 BC, a 13-year-old boy ascended to the throne of the Qin state in ancient China. His name was Ying Zheng, but history would remember him as Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor to unify China. What most people don't know is that from the moment he became king, this teenager ordered the construction of his tomb. It would take 38 years, 700,000 workers, and resources that nearly bankrupted an empire. Today, more than 2,000 years later, that tomb remains sealed. The Chinese government refuses to excavate it. Scientists who have studied the site report mercury levels in the soil so high that their instruments malfunction. Ancient texts describe rivers of liquid mercury flowing through an underground palace, crossbows designed to fire automatically at intruders, and a ceiling embedded with pearls to represent the stars. But these same texts were written by historians who never saw inside the tomb. They were recording legends, stories passed down through generations. So what is really inside the tomb of China's first emperor? Why has it remained unopened for over 2 millennia? And what are the authorities so afraid of finding? The discovery that brought this ancient mystery back into global consciousness happened almost by accident. In March 1974, farmers in Shaanxi province were digging a well during a severe drought. At a depth of about 4 meters, their shovels struck something hard. They initially thought it was an old pottery kiln, but as they cleared away more soil, they uncovered fragments of terracotta warriors, life-sized clay soldiers that had been buried for more than 2,000 years. Within weeks, archaeologists descended on the site. What they found shocked the academic world. This wasn't just a few scattered artifacts. It was an entire army, thousands upon thousands of terracotta warriors arranged in battle formation, each one unique, each face individually crafted. They had been standing guard in underground pits, protecting something. But protecting what, exactly? The warriors were positioned approximately 1.5 kilometers away from the actual burial mound of Emperor Qin Shi Huang. This suggested something extraordinary. The tomb itself, the sealed pyramid of earth that rises 76 meters above the surrounding landscape, had never been excavated. The Terracotta Army was merely the outer defense perimeter. If this much effort had been invested in the guards, what lay within the tomb they were protecting? Historical records provide tantalizing but disturbing clues. The ancient historian Sima Qian, writing about a century after the emperor's death, described the tomb's interior in his Records of the Grand Historian. He wrote that the emperor ordered the construction of an underground palace, filled with models of palaces, towers, and official buildings. The ceiling was decorated with heavenly bodies, pearls representing stars in the night sky. But the most shocking detail was what covered the floor. According to Sima Qian, craftsmen created rivers of mercury, mechanically driven to flow in imitation of the Yangtze and Yellow rivers, emptying into a miniature ocean. Mercury in ancient China was associated with immortality, the substance alchemists believed could grant eternal life. The emperor, obsessed with defeating death, had apparently ordered his final resting place to be filled with this toxic liquid metal. For centuries, scholars dismissed this account as mythology, an exaggeration meant to enhance the emperor's legendary status. But in the 1980s, Chinese archaeologists began conducting soil surveys around the burial mound. What they found changed everything. Multiple independent tests confirmed the presence of mercury in the soil surrounding the tomb, at concentrations 100 times higher than normal background levels. The mercury wasn't distributed randomly. Its concentration was highest near the center of the mound and decreased toward the edges. Exactly the pattern you would expect if a large quantity of mercury had been sealed underground and was slowly leaking through the soil over 2,000 years. Suddenly, Sima Qian's account didn't seem so mythological anymore. If the ancient texts were accurate about the Mercury rivers, what else might be true? The automatic crossbows, designed to kill tomb robbers? The poisoned arrows? The booby traps that ancient engineers installed to protect the emperor's rest for eternity? These questions have paralyzed Chinese authorities. In 1987, the tomb was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But while archaeologists have extensively excavated the surrounding areas, discovering the terracotta warriors, bronze chariots, and other artifacts, the main burial chamber remains untouched. The official explanation is that current technology is insufficient to safely excavate and preserve what lies beneath. But many experts believe the real reason is fear, not of ancient traps, but of what modern excavation might destroy. The tomb of Qin Huang is not just another archaeological site. It represents a complete time capsule from one of history's most crucial periods, the moment when China transformed from warring states into a unified empire. Everything we know about the Qin dynasty comes from texts written by later dynasties, often hostile to Qin Huang's memory. The tomb could contain documents, artwork, and artifacts that would revolutionize our understanding of ancient China. But it could also contain something far more valuable and far more fragile. Organic materials, like silk, wood, and paper, survive for millennia only under very specific conditions. The tomb has remained sealed for over 2,000 years, creating a stable internal environment. The moment that seal is broken, oxygen will flood in, humidity will change, and a process of rapid decay will begin. Archaeologists witnessed this tragedy firsthand in 1974, when the terracotta warriors were first exposed. When initially unearthed, many of the warriors retained traces of bright paint, reds and blues and greens that had survived underground. Within minutes of exposure to air, the paint began to flake and fade. Despite the best efforts of conservators, much of the original color was lost. Now imagine that same process happening not to painted clay, but to silk scrolls containing the lost writings of ancient philosophers, or wooden tablets inscribed with the emperor's own words, or wall paintings depicting daily life in the Qin court. The technology to preserve such materials in situ, in place as they're discovered, is still being developed. This is why the Chinese government has repeatedly stated that excavation will not begin until preservation technology advances significantly. But there's another reason why the tomb remains sealed. A reason that has more to do with politics than archaeology. Qin Huang is one of the most controversial figures in Chinese history. He unified China through brutal military conquest, killed scholars who disagreed with him, burned books to control historical narratives, and built the early sections of the Great Wall using forced labor that killed thousands. He was a tyrant by any measure, but also the founder of the Chinese imperial system that would endure for over 2 millennia. For the modern Chinese government, he represents a complex problem. How do you handle the legacy of a brutal dictator who also created the foundation of Chinese civilization? Opening his tomb could reveal artifacts that glorify his reign, or it could expose evidence of the atrocities he committed. Either outcome carries political risks. And so the tomb remains sealed, a buried secret that connects the present to a past that still shapes Chinese identity today. Yet, despite all precautions, the tomb is not as secure as authorities might wish. In 2006, satellite imaging revealed that the burial mound had begun to subside, sinking slightly as underground structures weakened after 2,000 years. Rainwater seepage, root growth from trees planted on the mound's surface, and natural geological processes were slowly compromising the tomb's integrity. In other words, time itself was becoming a threat. The question was no longer whether to excavate, but whether the tomb would survive long enough for future generations to develop the technology needed to explore it safely. This created an impossible dilemma. Excavate now and risk destroying irreplaceable artifacts through inadequate preservation techniques, or wait and risk that natural decay will destroy everything before excavation becomes possible. Chinese authorities chose a middle path. They began exploring the tomb using non-invasive techniques, methods that could reveal what lay inside without breaking the seal. Ground-penetrating radar, seismic surveys, and magnetic imaging have slowly built a picture of what lies beneath the burial mound. The results are astounding. The tomb is not a simple underground chamber. It's a complex structure with multiple levels descending deep into the earth, possibly as much as 30 meters below the surface. There are large, empty spaces, likely representing the palace chambers described in ancient texts, and smaller compartments that could be storage rooms filled with grave goods. The surveys also confirmed the presence of a massive quantity of metal, consistent with bronze statues, weapons, or ceremonial vessels. But the most intriguing discovery came from chemical analysis of the soil. In addition to mercury, researchers found traces of other rare compounds, substances that could only have come from organic materials like silk, lacquer, and wood. This suggests that the tomb interior might still contain preserved organic artifacts, a treasure trove of material that could rewrite our understanding of ancient Chinese culture, science, and art. Yet even with these tantalizing clues, excavation remains forbidden. The technology to safely extract and preserve what lies inside simply does not yet exist. Meanwhile, excavations in the areas surrounding the tomb have continued to yield extraordinary discoveries. In 2000, archaeologists unearthed a pit containing terracotta musicians and acrobats, suggesting the emperor wanted entertainment in the afterlife. In 2011, they found pits filled with suits of stone armor, meticulously carved from limestone, each suit requiring years to complete. These were not functional armor, they were symbolic, representations of military might meant to accompany the emperor eternally. In 2015, researchers discovered the remains of what appeared to be an imperial zoo. Bones from exotic animals, including a crane with a broken leg that had healed, suggesting it had been kept and cared for. Each discovery adds another layer to our understanding of the tomb complex. It was not just a grave. It was a complete underground empire, a reflection of the world above, built with the labor of hundreds of thousands of workers over nearly 4 decades. But who were these 700,000 workers, and what happened to them? Ancient texts suggest that the workforce included skilled artisans, conscripted laborers, and slaves. Many were prisoners of war from the states that Huang conquered during his unification campaigns. They worked in brutal conditions, hauling earth, carving stone, casting bronze, and painting terracotta. The mortality rate was catastrophic. Historical records mention that workers who knew the location of the tomb's entrance and the mechanisms of its traps were killed after the emperor's burial to ensure the secrets died with them. But archaeological evidence suggests something even darker. When excavating the terracotta warrior pits, researchers found human remains mixed with the broken pottery. These weren't formal burials. They were bodies that had been left where they fell, workers who died during construction and were simply covered over as the work continued. The tomb of Huang was built on the bones of those who served him, a monument to imperial power that consumed the lives of countless thousands. And what of the emperor himself? Historical accounts describe his final years as a descent into paranoia and madness. Obsessed with immortality, he consumed mercury pills prescribed by alchemists who promised eternal life. Modern toxicology reveals what the emperor didn't know. Mercury is a deadly neurotoxin that causes tremors, cognitive decline, and eventually death. The very substance he believed would grant him immortality was slowly poisoning him. In 210 BC, while on a tour of his empire, Qin Shi Huang died suddenly at age 49. His death was kept secret for months as his advisors maneuvered to control the succession. By the time his body arrived back at the capital, it had begun to decompose. To mask the smell, attendants loaded the funeral procession with carts of rotting fish. The man who had spent his entire reign trying to defeat death ended as corruption and decay, just like any other human. He was sealed inside the tomb he had spent 38 years building, surrounded by mercury rivers, automatic crossbows, and an army of clay soldiers. And there he remains. But the story doesn't end with the emperor's burial. Within 4 years of his death, the Qin dynasty collapsed. The empire he built through conquest and terror fell apart in rebellion and civil war. In 206 BC, rebel forces led by Xiang Yu sacked the Qin capital. According to historical records, Xiang Yu's army looted the tomb complex, stealing treasures and setting fires that burned for 3 months. This account has led many scholars to believe that the tomb was breached in antiquity, that whatever once lay inside was stolen or destroyed over 2,000 years ago, and that the sealed mound today contains nothing but empty chambers and ash. But archaeological evidence contradicts this narrative. The terracotta warrior pits do show signs of ancient burning and looting. Wooden roofs collapsed, and many warriors were smashed. But the main burial mound itself shows no evidence of excavation in ancient times. Its earth is compacted and undisturbed in ways that could only result from 22 centuries of settling, not from being dug up and refilled. The ancient looters may have raided the outer tomb complex, but they never reached the emperor's actual burial chamber. The automatic crossbows, the mercury rivers, the traps, whatever their nature, successfully protected the emperor's final resting place. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang remains sealed, just as it was when his body was lowered into the earth in 210 BC. This raises a profound question. If the tomb could survive the collapse of the dynasty, the looting of the capital, and over 2 millennia of wars, earthquakes, and changing political regimes, what does it mean to open it now? Some archaeologists argue that excavation is a moral imperative, that the knowledge contained within the tomb belongs to all humanity, and that each passing year risks losing that knowledge to natural decay. Others counter that the tomb is not ours to open, that it represents the final wishes of the people who built it, and that we have no right to disturb the dead, no matter how much we might learn. This debate reflects a larger question about archaeology itself. Are we investigators uncovering truth, or are we simply grave robbers with academic credentials? When does the pursuit of knowledge justify disturbing the rest of the dead? And who gets to make that decision? In recent years, Chinese authorities have begun to shift their position slightly. In 2020, they announced a long-term research project aimed at developing excavation and preservation technologies specifically for the emperor's tomb. The project has no set end date. It might take another 20 years, perhaps 50, perhaps longer. but it represents an acknowledgement that eventually the tomb will be opened. When that day comes, when the seal is finally broken and archaeologists descend into the underground palace, what will they find? Will Sima Qian's descriptions prove accurate? Will there really be rivers of mercury flowing through bronze channels, a ceiling of pearls representing the cosmos, and crossbows still primed to fire after 22 centuries? Or will the tomb be empty, looted long ago, containing nothing but dust and disappointment? Will there be documents that rewrite Chinese history, artworks that change our understanding of ancient aesthetics, or scientific instruments that reveal knowledge we thought was discovered centuries later? Or will the act of opening the tomb destroy everything inside, turning 2,000 years of preservation into ash within hours of exposure to modern air? Perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that the tomb contains something entirely unexpected, something that doesn't fit our current understanding of the ancient world. There are whispers among archaeologists who have studied the site, stories they don't publish in academic journals. Stories about the unusual magnetic readings that suggest the presence of metallic structures far more complex than bronze statues. Stories about the geometric precision of the underground chambers, which some claim shows mathematical knowledge that shouldn't have existed in the 3rd century BC. Stories about the mercury concentrations forming patterns that seem too regular to be simple leakage, as if the mercury is still contained in functioning mechanisms underground. These are speculations, nothing more. But they reflect a deeper uncertainty about what 22 centuries of sealed darkness might have preserved. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang was not built to be discovered. It was built to be eternal, a challenge to time itself. And so far, time has not won. There's something else worth considering, something that goes beyond archaeology and history. The emperor who built this tomb believed in immortality. He spent his wealth, his power, and the lives of 700,000 workers pursuing it. He consumed poison thinking it would grant eternal life. He created an underground empire believing he could rule forever. And, in a strange way, he succeeded. 2,000 years after his death, we're still talking about him, still wondering about him, still unable to ignore the monument he created. His name is known across the world. His tomb remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in archaeology. In that sense, Qin Shi Huang achieved something close to immortality, not through mercury pills or ancient magic, but through the sheer overwhelming scale of the monument he left behind. The tomb ensures that he will never be forgotten, that each generation will look at that sealed mound and wonder what lies beneath. Perhaps that was the real purpose all along. But there's a darker side to this immortality. The 700,000 workers who built the tomb are nameless. We don't know who they were, where they came from, or what they thought as they carved stone armor and cast bronze sculptures, knowing they would never see the finished result. Their lives were consumed by the emperor's dream of eternity, and history doesn't remember them. The terracotta warriors, each with unique faces, might be portraits of actual soldiers, but we'll never know their names. The tomb preserves the emperor's legacy, while erasing everyone who made that legacy possible. This is the pattern of history. Those with power are remembered, while those who built their monuments disappear. The sealed tomb of Qin Shi Huang is a testament to imperial grandeur, but it's also a mass grave, a place where the lives of countless thousands were sacrificed to one man's ego. When we wonder what's inside, we should also ask who paid the price for it to be built. So the tomb remains sealed, a mystery that connects the ancient past to the present moment. Chinese authorities continue their research, developing technologies that might one day allow safe excavation. Archaeologists publish theories and wait. Tourists visit the site, walking past the buried emperor, separated from one of history's greatest treasures by just 76 meters of earth. And the tomb itself sits silent, its secrets preserved by Mercury and time, and the strange reluctance of the living to disturb the dead. Will it be opened in our lifetimes? Will the technology be developed soon enough to save whatever lies inside from natural decay? Or will future generations curse us for waiting too long, for allowing irreplaceable artifacts to deteriorate while we debated ethics and preservation techniques? There's no easy answer. The tomb of Huang represents an impossible choice between the pursuit of knowledge and the preservation of the past. It forces us to confront questions about who owns history, who has the right to excavate the dead, and what responsibilities we have to both the past and the future. These are not questions that archaeology can answer alone. They require philosophy, ethics, and a humility about the limits of our understanding. What is really inside the tomb that took 700,000 workers 38 years to build? The honest answer is that we don't know. We have ancient texts that might be mythology. We have scientific surveys that suggest Mercury rivers and underground palaces. We have tantalizing clues from surrounding excavations, but the burial chamber itself remains sealed, untouched, a void in our knowledge. And perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Perhaps some mysteries are meant to remain mysteries, not because we lack the technology to solve them, but because the act of solving them would destroy what makes them meaningful. The tomb of Huang exists in a strange state between knowledge and imagination, between history and legend. And maybe, just maybe, that's where it should stay.